attending this breakout. It is my honor to introduce Sarah Maria Muriello. God, that's a pretty name. And Ross Barker from Pet Inclusive Housing Initiative. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Maggie. So I am I'm humbled to be here today, more so than I even thought I would be, just listening to the stories and hearing about the work y'all do every day. It's really amazing and wonderful to hear. So I'm grateful for the opportunity to be here. I am from the Pet Inclusive Housing Initiative. This presentation we have called Mind the Housing Gap. So this is building bridges from pet friendly to truly pet inclusive. We'll talk about the difference between the two and why that's important. I'm Ross Barker. I'm the program director for Pet Inclusive Housing at Michelson Found Animals with my colleague Sarah. She's going to talk more about the foundation overall. I've been with the program for about coming up on 4 years now. So a lot of great work, but a lot more to do. So we'll be talking about that today.
Thanks, Ross. So we're not gonna tag team too much, it's a little distracting, but I'm gonna take the first few slides. So my name is Sarah Maria Muriello. I'm the Senior Program Manager of the Pet Inclusive Housing Initiative. I've been with the program for about 2 years. My background is in animal sheltering. I spent 10 years in animal sheltering, and after a decade of some really heartbreaking work, realized that I wanted to do something more sustainable to help keep animals out of shelters. So I always tell Ross, like, when I saw the job description, I was like, that's my job. I don't care what other interviewees you've got going on, that's my job. And I was the first candidate, correct? Yes, Ross is like, yep. And I landed the job. So it's the best work I've ever been involved with. I have such a passion for it. And I'm so happy to be here and so grateful to Maggie and everyone for inviting us. Thank you. I just want to take a little bit, a moment to tell you where we come from. So the Pet Inclusive Housing Initiative is a program under Michelson Found Animals, which is a foundation under the umbrella of Michelson Philanthropies. Michelson Philanthropies was founded by Dr. Gary Michelson, who is an orthopedic surgeon, an inventor, an entrepreneur, and primarily a philanthropist. And he has lots of interests from medical research to education to animals, and he was also really inspired by the heartbreak that happened in Katrina, and that's how he ended up founding Michelson Found Animals, starting with microchipping, right, and trying to get animals reunified, but he realized there are a lot of other reasons why animals and their people are separated, and that's why he founded Michelson Found Animals. So the vision, sorry this is so small, but the vision for MFA, Michelson Found Animals, is that people and pets belong together. That's literally our belief, right? And so all of the programs that are under Michelson Found Animals, there's strategic initiatives, there's programs, there's investments, and they all are supposed to impact where pets intersect with our lives. And we know that pets intersect everywhere, including in housing, right? And so that's how the Pet Inclusive Housing Initiative, or PIHI, as we like to call it for short, because it's quite a mouthful, that's how PIHI was developed. And the idea behind our work is that we are building a stronger and more pet-inclusive housing industry. And when we talk about housing, we mean at every point, right? The continuum, right? From emergency to supportive to permanent. And we do a lot of research from which we create resources, partnerships, and actionable tools to increase the availability of truly pet-inclusive housing, which Ross will get a little bit more into the definition of. We have some really big aspirations at PIHI. Right now, right in this moment in time, we're really clear where the housing industry is in general. In general, housing, when it comes to housing, we think of pets as sort of an afterthought, right? So we want to get people into housing, and we're not necessarily thinking about pets as family, right? So they become this afterthought, like, oh, let's welcome the person, right? And at whatever stage of housing they're in, but we're not thinking about the pet. So we truly believe that if we can get to this aspiration where pets are family, they're not going to be an afterthought. They're not going to be a source of ancillary income in market rate housing, right? We will assume a pet to be part of the family situation. Somebody enters a hospital, right? We ask about family, pets should be assumed to be part of that family until told otherwise, right? And so we believe very much the same for housing. We do think there's some steps to take to get there. First, we have to welcome dogs and cats and other animals, right, into the fold. We have to offer them amenities. We have to address issues of breed and weight restrictions in all types of housing, fees, right? There's still BSL, breed-specific legislation out there that prevents folks from owning certain pets in their own homes. Legal companion animals of any kind need to be allowed in housing, and then we live in this world where pets are family. I also want to just take a moment to acknowledge all of the other animal well-being organizations out there that are doing work in the housing space. You might be familiar with some of them, Red Rover in particular. We collaborate and partner with all of these organizations. It's really important that we do the work together. We might have different approaches, but our goals are always the same. And so we would encourage you, if you think there's a way we can work directly with you or help you, we would be more than welcome. We would really invite that. Okay, and with that, I'm gonna turn it over to Ross to start us with a little bit of an agenda that will give some shape to the presentation.
Thanks, Sarah. So my background, I came into this with, just to go back to that because Sarah mentioned hers, and we've got what I think is a really great partnership where I had a business background. I worked for Mars Pet Care in Banfield for a long time, had a lot of insight into what was important to people when they were with their pets. Hadn't thought about it from the housing angle so much, and this program's allowed me to do that, but then also bringing Sarah with the animal welfare background, the sheltering background. I think we've been able to do some pretty, well, at least fun for us work. So we'll get into that. So I want to talk about what is the overall challenge we're seeing when it comes to pets and housing. Talk about the barriers to that. And then we're going to spend a lot of time talking about what can we do about it. And then even more specifically, what can be done right now. So it's important to us that people, if they see our resources, can walk away from a presentation or from an interaction with something they can go do tomorrow. So starting off, what's the challenge? I mean, I think none of this is going to be surprising to people. I mean, we know that 2/3, 70% of households in the U.S. own a pet. It's part of their family, as Sarah said, and so we have to think of them like that. You also factor in the general housing challenges that are widespread across the country in terms of affordability, just in terms of availability of housing. But then when you layer on the pet piece, it becomes even more of an issue, right? I mean, just makes it that it puts the housing further and further out of reach. Then there's the impact on the shelter. If I suspect that you and others that we know of are shelters are saying that the number one and number two reason pets show up at their doors is because of a housing issue for the person that's taking care of them. And then there's the outflow. So the people that can't take the pets that are currently filling the shelters, the large dogs in particular, because of the housing restrictions they know they face or the fees they know they can't pay. So that's the backdrop for all of this. So this pet friendly, I mean, we say pet friendly a lot, and it's not well defined. It's used a little bit too loosely and covers up a lot of work that's not so pet friendly. So let's look at some numbers. This is from research that we did that started the program. When we talked to owners and operators of rental housing, 76% said they're pet friendly. And that's the way we framed the questions. Are you pet friendly? 76% said yes. But then we started digging into some other factors. So let's ask about cats and dogs. So some allow cats but not dogs. Some allow dogs but not cats. Some impose breed restrictions, size restrictions, limitations on the number of pets, non-refundable fees, monthly pet rents, no pet amenities, and a generally non-welcoming environment. It's not maybe so pet-friendly anymore, right? So it's not really surprising that 72% of residents, so kind of the same, right around the same number, say that pet-friendly housing is hard to find. So it's this disconnect between people saying they're trying to find pet-friendly housing, can't find it, with housing providers saying, we offer it. So we're trying to dig into that difference. And in the end, only 8% of rental housing is free of all pet restrictions. So that 76% is really more like 8%. Part of what we've tried to do then is define more specifically what we mean by pet friendly and then distinguish that from what we call pet inclusive. So we aren't thinking of pet inclusive just as a newer, updated term for pet friendliness. We're thinking about it as something really fundamentally different. So pet friendly is what we'd all expect, housing that allows residents to have at least one pet, regardless of restrictions. There's probably some restrictions, but they allow pets, so pet friendly, we'll give them that. But pet inclusive, much higher bar. There's going to be no breed restrictions, there will be no weight or size restrictions, no non-benefit fees, and all basic pet amenities. So by non-benefit fees, what we're talking about are a fee just because. You got a pet, okay, $50 a month because you have a pet. What we're talking about is if there's going to be a fee, then people should know what they're paying for, right? There should be something they get. Either you're assured that the bark dust at the dog park or the turf at the dog park is replaced every 6 months and maintained. Those kinds of things that are specifically spelled out. Otherwise, it's fair to ask, what am I paying for? So we kind of look at it this way. Orange is pet friendly, what we just talked about. Green is pet inclusive. We're trying to move housing providers of all kinds across the spectrum to this green space as opposed to the orange space. So that's the challenge. We spend a lot of time trying to make this move and make these properties more pet inclusive. A little bit about how we do that. So we have access to a really large database of rental properties across the U.S. It covers more than 200,000 rental properties with more than 20 million units, and allows us to look at things, not only location and kind of what the makeup of the property is, but also what are their pet policies? Do they allow dogs? Do they allow cats? What kinds of fees do they have? And what kind of restrictions do they have in place? So we can dig in and see a little bit more. And this varies from market to market, so it's really helpful for us to see what is it like in Las Vegas compared to Los Angeles, for example. We like to use the data then, as I said, to kind of look at what a market looks like, what an area looks like in terms of both pet friendliness, which is what you see here. So this is just a sampling of some different markets. You can see this is pet friendly. So thinking back to that definition, these are in a market or in a city plus metro area, places that allow pets based on the data that we have. So it ranges, these are all up 70+%. Most places, LA is low. I mean, it might seem surprising. Los Angeles is the lowest one up there. It has to do a lot with the way that their housing is, the composition of their housing stock, a lot of older, smaller buildings. But, 75%, if you think about 2/3 of households owning pets, if these were truly pet-friendly, pet-inclusive, these numbers might be sufficient to house people. But it's uniformly kind of where it shows right there, going up 75% plus. But let's talk about think about the definition of pet inclusive. And the orange bar represents pet inclusive in those same markets. So you see it drop below 10% every place. And actually, Philadelphia used to be over 10, and it's dropped in the past year. So we're really seeing a pretty big gap every place. So we think about this gap. We call it the kind of the pet friendly. The PFPI gap is our shorthand for it. So this is what we're trying to resolve, is what is the difference? So, I mean, it'd be great if we could get those blue bars even higher so that all places were pet friendly. But if we could really close this gap and get rid of the restrictions, get rid of the fees, just make places more welcoming so when people bring their family to a new living situation and that family includes a pet, it doesn't, they're able to do what they would do anyway, even if they didn't have the pet.
So Ross and I talk a lot about, our data, not to interrupt, but Ross and I ideate all day long. So this is kind of an ideation session. Here we go. But one of the things we want to point out is this data, right, is based on market rate housing, right, which is really where the data come from. Our suspicion is that it's generally reflective of what is happening in different housing situations, right? We don't have any reason to believe that the number of folks who have pets entering market rate housing is any different than the demographics for folks who are entering other housing situations. So 2/3 of them are gonna have pets with them no matter what their housing scenario looks like. And so the point for us is that when we look at housing, we think of it as a continuum, right? And so the data at this point we're using from the market rate housing, but we feel like it's reflective. And we also want to emphasize that the reason these numbers matter, even though it's market rate housing for the type of housing y'all provide, is that when folks leave these emergency situations and these temporary housing environments, this is the world they enter, right? And so it's wonderful that pet friendliness seems more ubiquitous, right, across different housing types. But the reality is that when they end up in permanent housing, the animal that they might have had with them that was welcomed in other housing situations is not going to be, right? And so we'll talk about all the solutions towards that. Out of curiosity, I just wanted to ask, or I don't want to put you on the spot, but again, the focus here is thinking about restrictions or policies you might have in place that around pets that are actually barriers, right, to keeping people and pets together. And so when we think of this gap, we think of it as a massive barrier. So I just wanted to give some context to why we're pulling these numbers, but we think they're pretty reflective.
No, thanks. I mean, that's important to think about, and it is that continuum that's important, right? And if I think about even just the 2 videos we saw, 2 testimonials at the end, right? Neither of those dogs would be allowed in most housing, permanent market rate housing. So that's why it's important, because eventually we want people to flow and to have their lives rebuilt, right? And to find the place that they can call home with their whole family. And so those people with those dogs aren't going to find housing. And even if they do, what kind of fees are they going to have? So we have to address those issues so we can kind of continue to support people all the way through. So why aren't more pets allowed in rental housing? Yeah, there's tons of reasons. Think about what you think are the most common reasons that you might either think about or hear about. A big one is just there's a lack of recognition that there's a problem. So think back to that 72% of housing providers that say that they're pet friendly. They think they've got this solved. I mean, I've had conversations. We work with the National Apartment Association and have tried to we present there frequently. We are later this month or next month. But one of the things they bring up is we don't need to have this kind of presentation. We've already got this figured out. I mean, we've literally used the words, we've got the pet thing figured out, because 72% of us are pet friendly. And so we need to come back and say, not exactly solved yet. Yes. However, they do raise reasonable concerns. And our point is not that these concerns don't exist. We don't try to say, nope, you're wrong, that's not true. We just say they're not insurmountable, right? There's ways to manage through and mitigate the concerns you have. So one of those is damages. Damages comes up almost always, maybe the first thing that comes up. We're going to go into some information here. We'll give some data later, but damages are probably far less than most people think they are caused by pets. There's always going to be the extreme case somebody can throw out. Like, I had to replace all the carpeting because of a cat. I had to replace all the trim because of a dog chewing that up. So, but that's, but those are the extreme cases. We have to always go back to the data. That's one thing I want to say, is that we are very data-driven, very research-driven in our recommendations and our resources, so that if we focus on the extreme case, that's not what we're really having to manage for. We need to manage for what is typically happening, and that's much more doable. Insurance barriers comes up a lot. My insurance company won't let us have big dogs, won't have us have these breeds, won't let us have more than X number of pets per person, that sort of thing. Again, there's ways to work around these things, to acknowledge that these barriers are in place, but to provide an alternative. Bites and liability. This feeds a little bit into the insurance piece, but we hear so much about bites, especially, we all know there's particular breeds, like suspected breeds or perceived breeds that cause the most bites. And those are the ones that we hear about in the news and the media. Everybody picks up on those stories, and just there's a kind of a frightening aspect to that. Well, it's, we hear, even from the property, the housing properties we talk to, they'll say that. They'll say, really, I know we have these breed restrictions, and I love my pit bull. I don't understand why we have this restriction, because it's really the Chihuahuas and the small dogs that won't leave people alone. So waste is another one. So people not picking up after their pets. This is, it's a big issue, an easy one to point to. Other residents and what their concerns are, or what their, again, perceived concerns, thinking that, well, I have all these renters and residents in my property that have allergies, or that just are afraid of dogs, or don't want to be around cats. And again, we'll show some data that shows that this is pretty exaggerated. And then there's just the unknowns. Like I've never had dogs, I've never let big dogs on. What happens if I do let them on all of a sudden? What am I going to have to do differently? And I'm not ready for that. So fortunately, there's things we can do. There's talking points we can provide and resources we can make available. So start by just engaging with the solutions that are out there. Let's do a damages reality check. Rental housing professionals report that 28%, this is from our research. So there's two pieces of research we want to talk about here. One is the work that we did, the Pet Inclusive Housing Initiative. Our report from 2021 has, we found that 9% of pet owning renters reported that their pet caused any damage to a unit, so pretty small. There's another report that just came out earlier this year from Pet Screening. So this is an industry, a housing industry supplier that does screening of pets for rental properties. So their research is going to be more on the other side of things, right? They're talking to their own. They found in their research that 28% caused damage. So, okay, so the number is probably someplace in the middle. That's still a pretty small number. Still a pretty small number. And so not commensurate with the damage you hear about from people. Let's also look at the average amount of damages when there is when there are pet-related damages. Our research showed that it was about a little over $200. And then the pet screening research that we want to compare with is almost $600. So, there's a pretty good gap there, but still $600 when you think about what a standard security deposit is in most places, it's going to be within that. So if that's what the security deposit is for, is to take care of damages and updates that need to happen after, upgrades that need to happen, not upgrades, but just fixes that need to happen after somebody moves out, then it should be covered. So these numbers don't indicate that the damages are so bad that we need to make that an issue. And then what are some solutions we can put in place, housing providers can put in place, housing providers of any kind, no matter what kind of housing you're offering, to think about how do we mitigate, how do we protect ourselves against damages. So one of those is a pet personality profile. This is our alternative to blanket breed restrictions or size restrictions. This is looking at the individual dog or the individual pet and learning about that pet and then making a decision based on that. We're not saying that that housing providers can or should allow every pet that comes their way, but I think they need to be, we're saying that we need to make the decision based on different factors, so not on the breed, not on the size. And so this takes you through it takes people through a bunch of questions. At the end of that, you can decide, okay, this is a good fit for our community or it isn't. And there's no right or wrong answer. There's no score attached to this. So as a housing provider at one place, I could get the same answers, and Sarah get the same answers as a housing provider or another community, and we may choose it differently. Then another piece that really helps is sample pet agreement. So this is one that we've put together that allows, so that it kind of puts a two-way responsibility on both parties to this, because then it's saying, okay, here, as a house provider, here's what I'm going to provide. As a renter, here's what you're going to do to make sure that this is a good environment. And I'll also say, I mean, all of these things are on our website too, and I think we'll make some available. However, it's easiest, but everything's on our website and pretty easy to find. You can always contact us if it's not. So,
while of course we wrote these with the multifamily industry, right, in mind, we would, going back to the pet personality profile, we would encourage y'all to take a look at it and see if there's things you want to adapt from it, or use it as a resource, to use it as I guess sort of like, an application or an interview, or getting to know you for the pet. It's really important. One of the things we emphasize so much around all of the solution is transparency. Knowing that animal, right? And again, there's no right or wrong answers. If the animal bit, okay, right? Let's find out more about what happened. And that's what the pet personality profile will do. There is a question. Oftentimes what we see the industry do is they'll ask those, just a yes or no question. So like, has your dog ever bitten anyone? Yes or no? I've lied on every single application for housing, because every single dog I've had has bitten. But the problem is, I'm never allowed to provide context, because what I want to say is my dog was a recent amputee. They were being, handled by a new vet tech who didn't know what they were doing. And yeah, she bit. Also, she was a Chihuahua, so I'm sorry. But I'm sorry. So we base these questions on assessing the animal as an individual holistically, understanding their whole history, which is so important, right? And then again, no right or wrong answers, no score. It's just whatever you feel is right, or know what your community has an appetite for. And when we say community, whatever that community looks like, right? So we really encourage you to check these out on our website, petsandhousing.org, and utilize them, because they're really applicable across the housing spectrum.
and these are also modifiable. I mean, you can take and make it yours, tailor. And also, I mean, we're also open to feedback too. So if you say, look, this doesn't really work for us because this is our situation, happy to work with individual organizations to make it better, and maybe make something that we can generally put out to a different type of community, for different types of communities. This was developed, and the other one too, we spoke to behaviorists about this. I mean, we had opinions about what we thought this should look like, but we wanted to make sure that it made sense from a animal behavior perspective as well. So always trying to make these really usable and not forced on people with our own opinions. So let's do an insurance reality check. Property insurance companies do offer liability coverage that don't have this language. So there are some companies that don't have restrictive language about pets in their policies. They are out there. So what we need to do when we encounter this discussion, or we have this point being made to us about insurance, is say, have you checked? Have you looked? Are you sure that your company does that? And if it's important to you, you can go find another one. And there's some solutions here. So we have an insurance discovery tip sheet. This is one of the resources for housing providers that are interested. So again, ask these questions. Are these real restrictions, or are they just guidelines, and you can still make your own choice? Are they differentiating between the dog breed and a dangerous dog? Again, back to the individual as opposed to just a blanket requirement or restriction. Also ask, what is the data? What is the actuarial data to back that up? Because we ask all the time. We have never, not once, seen a piece of data that supports this. Right? So the insurance companies have their thoughts, and they probably do have some data, but they're not sharing it. Right? And so we think that's an opportunity for a housing provider to say, okay, well, I want to understand, if you're putting this restriction in place, let's understand why. Because I want to have these more, I want to expand our access to more dogs. And then also, is there an opportunity for an endorsement or a rider to be put onto a policy that would allow the coverage to extend to a pet? So even though that may be part of the policy, is there a small fee that the housing provider can pay to put There's a little bit extra premium they pay on their policies to bring this into the mix. So talk about breed, bites, incidents. So again, we base everything on research, on data. It's important to us that we aren't making our own suppositions about things without kind of knowing what's out there. So up in the top left corner, you see the report. I've mentioned the pet screening report that came out earlier this year. We're going to look at that too. So we're not going to ignore a source of data just because we think they might have a different point of view on things. Right? I want to bring that into the mix because that's what other people are looking at. So that's out there. But in that report, even in their report, they said that properties reported less than 0.1% pet bites per 100 units over the past 12 months. So the notion that bites of any kind are a really big concern is sort of put into question by their own research in the industry. They also say that data indicates that no direct correlation between the number of breed restrictions. There is no correlation between the number of breed restrictions and the impact of damages in a property. So if breeds were really an issue, we should see fewer incidents on properties that allowed those breeds than on one that doesn't. And we don't see that. So that's just another point to make that this is not, you're not basing this on real information. And then there's also a study, you may all be familiar with this, published in 2022, the peer-reviewed article, peer-reviewed research that gets into the specifics about breed and how it's not a way to assess individual behavior of a dog, particularly when it comes to aggression. There's some pieces of it that are related in terms of their genetic makeup, but then there's only 9% of that is even relevant. And the other thing is, I'm sure you'll experience, who's even deciding what breed the dog is, right? From a housing provider perspective, are we leaving that to the leasing agent to make a determination on what breed that dog is? Vets can't even tell. So I think there's just so many flaws with this, and that's why we're trying to go away from it. We're trying to push away from it. But again, using information. So some solutions. We really talk about how breed is not equal behavior, referring back to that research that we just showed you. We share facts about it. We do a lot of data pulling from the National Canine Research Council. They have a lot of great information about so-called aggression in certain breeds and better data than what you would find on dogbites.org. Don't believe dogbites.org. What they're saying. There's better sources of information. Use the pet personality profile, and then question these biases. And so these are some writers here that some publishers that we look to think about what are the unconscious biases that we're talking about. A lot of the dog breed restrictions go way back to early racial discrimination laws that were put in place a long time ago, and they've just filtered on, but now they've been sort of personified in the pet as opposed to the individual. And I'm going to turn over to Sarah to get into community reality check.
Thanks, Ross. All right, so community reality check. So here's another concern we hear, right, is other residents are not going to like the pets, right? We get that a lot. So again, we looked at the industry. So we went to their own research to say, we don't think that's actually the case. There is a research company called Grace Hill that does a lot of work in the multifamily rental housing space, and they paired up with NMHC, National Multifamily Housing Council, to do a renter preferences survey back in 2024, not that long ago. And what they found, which was great, I love this data point, only 6% of respondents, I call them curmudgeons, said that they would only rent at a property that restricted breeds or weights, right? So, first of all, really, like, you're literally finding a property. Okay, there's space for that, I suppose, right? But it's only 6% of folks out there who are looking for properties that restrict breeds and weights. So that tells you that 94% of residents are like, yeah, pets sound great. That's fine with me, right? Only 7% of respondents to the survey said that pet-friendly friendliness would make them less likely to live at a property. So again, I think it's the same group of folks who are saying, yeah, I don't really want to live at a property that accepts pets. And you know what? There is space for that. There are people, right, who have really severe allergies, maybe autoimmune issues, maybe even severe trauma that they haven't had the resources to deal with, right, around pets. But we know from the industry that 25% of rental properties out there in the US don't accept pets. So these folks have plenty of options to choose from, right? When they dug a little deeper with these 7% who said, yeah, like, I don't want to live at a pet-friendly property, they were like, well, why not? 80% said it's because people are not picking up after their pets. And again, as we mentioned earlier, we feel like that's a surmountable issue, right? Get a bunch of pet waste stations. They don't cost a lot, right? I remember my biggest gripe at a property that I used to live at was that they had 500 units on site. They were so proud of that. We have 500 units. 3 pet waste stations. And literally, I think they said like 380 something units had dogs, one or more dogs. And I was like, what are we supposed to do? No wonder there's poop everywhere, right? So we always tell the housing providers, you know, if this is the number one gripe, that's really solvable and it's yours to solve for, right? Other folks said pet-related noise, smells, allergies. Surprisingly, we hear that thrown at us a lot, like allergies is a top concern, but it was only about 20% of folks from this survey that mentioned that. Fear of animals, and then other, right? The pet screening report also dug a little into this question around how people feel about pets, and about 61% of the single-family respondents and about 47% of the multifamily respondents, so single-family homes and then multifamily homes, said that having a pet-friendly property has increased resident satisfaction. So the housing providers were like, yes, basically, when we allow pets, we know that our residents are more satisfied. And that seems pretty clear since pets are family. We also did research in our 2021 Pet Inclusive Housing Report, which you can access online. 98% of renters with pets and 92% of all residents, so people who may or may not have had a pet, said that pets are important members of the family, right? And this is another great one. In comparison to others, including neighbors with children, pet owners are preferred by both pet owning and non-pet owning residents. Yes, we can agree. Actually, there is data, and I can't remember the actual data point, but children do cause more damage to rental units than pets do. The housing providers will say that, but we don't charge an extra child fee, right? We don't charge an extra child security deposit, but somehow the industry has decided to do that with pets. And again, we think it goes to that fundamental issue of pets are not considered part of the family unit. They're kind of considered this afterthought or side situation. All right, so what are some community solutions? Because again, we want to acknowledge that there are concerns, right? Allergies, fear of animals, trauma, whatever it may be. When I put together this slide, I was very much channeling my animal sheltering experience, right? And so some of this I'm hoping will resonate with you, but I also want to hear from you after this slide what you all think. So depending on the type of housing situation, right, that you're offering, whether it's off-site care or it's on-site care or in-unit care, you know, there is the reality that pets are pets, they're animals, they're not humans, we can't communicate with them in the same way, and so they're gonna bring with them all of their animal-related issues, and it's our job to manage them, right? So I broke these into sort of 4 categories of animal management, depending, and these solutions may work and maybe they don't, but just throwing them out there. Highly recommend training, and we always think, oh, animals should be trained. I would say humans. I would go ahead and say we really do a disservice to so many of the animals in our lives unintentionally because we don't understand how they communicate, right? So I think my dog is smiling at me. No, he's super, super stressed out, probably needs a break and a nice quiet crate, right, with a towel wrapped around him and some soothing music, right? He's not having a good time. And then people wonder why they get bit, right? Oh, I don't know what happened. He was just sitting there. He looked like he was having a great time. No, probably not, right? And it's no one's fault. It's just that we, from a young age, we're not taught in school, right, how to understand dog, cat, other animal body language. So I would say training for people, and we'll talk a little bit about how to get that for free. Positive reinforcement training for pets, right? We know that aversive methods like choke chains and forcing an animal into a situation that they don't want to be really has negative consequences for that animal down the line and is likely to lead to even more poor behavior. So positive reinforcement is giving animals breaks, giving animals rewards, really honoring their needs over our own. Highly recommend for cats, it's 1 litter box per cat plus 1. You got 1 cat, you get 2 litter boxes, and they gotta be in different areas. A lot of litter box problems are related to the fact that cats are really picky about where they use the bathroom, and they need many, many options. So if you have 2 cats, I would say 3 litter boxes, right? So always think 1. So if there's litter issues, I would try that first. That might help. Visual barriers are really helpful if you're going to have an animal in a crate, if you're in congregate housing, or even if you're just in a single unit and the animal seems to be having some behavior issues or anxiety. Oftentimes giving them a safe place to go and then have it covered is really helpful. And also keeping reactive animals from seeing each other if they have to be side by side in different types of housing, creating those visual barriers so they're not direct staring. In dog world, right, that sort of direct stare is not a good thing, right? It's like let's start something, right? And we don't want that. So think of that if you're in a scenario where you're having to keep animals close together. In terms of environment, ample waste stations, right, make it convenient for people. No-go sprays are really helpful, and stain removers so they don't keep going in the same spot. Daily cleaning, make it a volunteer position, make it part of the resident experience that we gotta clean. And then there is allergy medication out there, right, that is really, really helpful, that's over the counter, that can address some of those issues. Also, I forgot, but like good air filtration systems, you can get like the portable units are really helpful as well. For the animals, in terms of their well-being, routine is everything, and you might have experienced this, right? Animals they thrive on routine, and when you mess it up, it can really throw them off. So routine is everything. Try your best to help them and the residents stick to the animal's routine. White noise machines. Animals love white noise. I mean, not high-pitched white noise, but they like the white noise machine. So those are really soothing if you're trying to block out sounds that may be footsteps, other animals. That's really helpful. Enrichment activities, licky mats, right? Kongs, those Kong toys that you freeze and put a bunch of peanut butter in. There's so many things to keep animals busy. One of the misconceptions that we have is all dogs need walks every day. Not all dogs actually like that many walks. They do need some physical activity, but mental stimulation is it's so fulfilling for them, right? So fulfilling. Give them a licky mat. Give them a dog puzzle to solve for, right? Cats the same way, right? They can do the same. They can have licky mats as well. Pheromone sprays and collars can be really soothing. So these are scents that we can't smell, but the animals can smell. And you can get them for cats and dogs. It really helps them stay calm, especially in spaces where they might be getting whiffs of other animals. Regular grooming is important, right? Just as we feel good when we've taken a shower, so do dogs. Walks are important, but again, depending on the animal, how long and where and how is important. A fenced outdoor space is helpful. And then for cats, catios, scratch pads, right? We talk about damages. Offer scratch pads. They get the ones that drape over the sofas and the chairs. Cats should have scratching areas all over the place. I also really want to emphasize heating pads for cats. Does anyone know what the preferred temperature of most cats, like the room temperature for most cats should be? 80 degrees. So if you're somebody who likes it at 65 and you're wondering why your cat is like not using their litter box, it's because they're freezing all the time and they're not happy, right? So I bring all these things to your attention because it's all about well-being, right? When we talk about concerns about animal behavior and we say, well, the dog's gonna bite or the cat is gonna scratch, animals don't do behaviors for no reason, right? So if we want to prevent a lot of these concerns that we have about biting and about damages and all the things that they can potentially do, we need to make sure that we're addressing their entire well-being, because if that's the case, they're less likely to do all the things that we're worried about, right? Which is why I'm bringing this up. Health is a huge factor, right? I mentioned the number of litter boxes as a reason why cats don't use their litter box, but sometimes it can be medical, right? And so if there's a way to get a vet exam for an animal upon arrival plus annual vet exams, that can be really helpful. Good nutrition, right? It's also the quality of the food that the animal is eating. Just like if we eat like junk food all day long, our brains just don't work well. It's the same thing for animals. Pain medication. Animals hide their pain so well, right? Panting, like, oh, that dog's always panting, even if it's like 60 degrees in the room. Probably in pain, right? So when we are connected to the animals and the residents are connected with their animals, they'll notice these changes, and that might be a sign to go to a vet. Also, there are behavioral medications out there, right, for animals experiencing lots of anxiety or other behavioral issues. There are medications out there that veterinarians can provide. So again, sorry to go deep. It's just a huge passion of mine, because I feel like a lot of the concerns that we hear from these housing providers are based on behaviors that animals display that we just don't understand where they come from. We don't understand why, and so it's that unknown. We're like, well, he's gonna bite. Well, if we understand what leads to a bite, we can probably mitigate that, right? And a lot of that has to do with this. All right. So how can you make that happen in your space, right? In your housing space? Well, I would say contact your local animal shelters and rescues. They are always wanting to help. These people are, it's like, you might know them, and I know the volunteer came from that space, right? People involved in this work only want to help, and if they can help you in any way, they just need to be told, like, hey, I need this. I need a trainer to come, and I need all the residents to get a training, right? Or, hey, I need funding for like 100 licky mats because all the dogs here need to get enrichment. They'll jump on that right away. There's also local groomers, pet supply stores, big chains. I remember our shelter, we used to always do like a weekly pickup from Target. Target would give us all their like pet stuff that didn't sell. They loved giving it to us. They were so happy. Like the employees used to fight over who got to do the delivery to our truck. So again, take advantage of anyone in the pet world. They wanna help. Local veterinarians can also help, right? Especially in these types of situations, and you probably partner with them, right? How many of you have partnered with local vets, groomers, yep, rescues, shelters? They're there to help. If you need help finding them, there's pets.findhelp.com, pethelpfinder.org, goodpup.com, and then I wanna emphasize fear-free. So pets.findhelp.com and Pet Help Finder. There's no like national website for all the animal shelters in the US, but most of them are now listed on those top two in some capacity if they have services to offer. So you'll be able to find a shelter or a rescue in your neck of the woods that is willing to help from those websites. Good Pup partners with a lot of shelters to provide free online training or discounted training. And so if you reach out to them and tell them who you are and the type of work you do, I can't imagine them saying no to helping you out. Also, fearfree.com. Has everyone heard of Fear-Free training or used it? Yeah, incredible, right? So a lot of the things that I mentioned on the previous slide, you can go down the rabbit hole of training and behavior if you want with Fear-Free, but highly recommend, right, non-aversive training methods for pets. The other thing I just want to say is don't forget to ask for help, right? Like don't forget to ask for help, and the way you ask for help is that you tell people what you do. So tell your funders, tell your donors, tell your community what you need, right? Otherwise they can't help you, and they want to. So if your goal is to start accepting even more animals or different types of animals or animals with no restrictions, right? tell them what your goal is, and tell them you have some idea of how you want to get there, but you need their help doing it, right? And they'll come and help you. I also want to end on sort of a positive note and a sustainability note, right? Because I remember in animal sheltering, so much of the work that we did was like right now, emergency, immediate, and it kind of just felt like we were always underwater. And so I always was looking for like, what is the sustainable piece? When does this end? So I do want to point out that there's a lot of work being done at the policy and legislative levels around keeping people and pets together in housing. And the Pet Inclusive Housing Initiative team, through our colleagues at the Michelson Center for Public Policy, are part of that. We support MCPP for short. We love acronyms at our organization. We support MCPP with pet inclusive data, information, and insights. And from that, MCPP supports legislative and policy efforts to advance pet inclusive housing, right, and keep more people and pets together. So if you have an interest in policy, if your organization is interested in policy or legislation at the local level, right, at the state level, at the federal level, we're here for it. We're here to support. We have access to a lot of data from all types of communities across the US. We could do it by zip code, county, whatever you like. But we can't forget that legislation is often a major driver of keeping people and pets together in housing. So we just want to let you know that we're on it, we're working really hard, and we're here to support. All right, so if that was a lot of information, which I think it was, you might be going, okay, sounds great, but like, what can I do like right now? Couple of things. First, don't forget to visit our website, petsandhousing.org. It has all of the resources that Ross referred to on our resource for breed does not equal behavior, the pet personality profile, sample pet agreement, on and on and on. So petsandhousing.org is our website. And then we would ask you to share those resources out. Sorry, I'll go back. Petsandhousing.org, I saw the camera up. Yes. Absolutely, whatever you want. Absolutely, so it'll be up there. So share our resources out. Your organization or agency or other, like whoever in your world needs to know about pet inclusive housing, share it out. You can do it on your social platforms. We have graphics for you to use. So if you don't have the bandwidth to create graphics for your Instagram account or whatever, just email us. I'll give the emails at the end. We'll create graphics for you. Link to us in your e-blast if you need content. Have a little like pet inclusive corner of your newsletter that talks about one of our resources or something, right? Make it your own, whatever you need. And feel free to link to our website from yours if you wish. That's more than welcome to. The other thing you can do right now is sign up for our newsletter. So if you want updates on all things pets and housing, there's a QR code for that to join our newsletter. We won't spam you. We promise it's just once a month. And you can follow us on LinkedIn. We're most engaged on LinkedIn because the multifamily industry is. And so that's where we put a lot of our content, a lot of our research, a lot of our events. So please sign up for the newsletter, follow us on LinkedIn or both. And if you can't grab the QR codes, no worries, just go to petsandhousing.org. Another thing you can do is figure out what's going on in housing. Two great sources from very opposite ends of the spectrum, but we like to look at the whole industry. Harvard Joint Center for Housing Studies regularly publishes white papers, all kinds of data. They do great webinars on all things housing. And then the National Multifamily Housing Council, NMHC, if you want to know what's going on in the multifamily world. Keep tabs on them as well. They've got some great research out. All right, and that concludes our presentation. Whatever you need, let us know, right? If it wasn't covered here, let us know. If there's something you want to talk about, you can come up and talk to us, but we also have our email addresses. Thank you all so much. I don't know, Ross, do you have any parting words? Thank you so much. Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Oh my gosh, aren't they amazing? I'm so thrilled you guys were able to make it. I knew as soon as we met that first time, I think you're the first ones that I'm like, oh my God, everybody needs to know this. Amazing, amazing. And as they've given us permission, their website is tremendous resources. We'll be sharing those too in Litmus, and we're actually going to be doing a little bit of a tutorial on Litmus this afternoon for anyone who hasn't had the opportunity to use it yet. It is now time for lunch. Isn't that cute? It's Italian. So a couple things that we wanted to let you know that I already forgot. Oh, tours. If you are interested in touring Noah's Animal House tomorrow, please talk to Marlene. She's obviously the executive director, and she will be able to work with you on that. I think we're going to do a sign up sheet actually outside either this afternoon or tomorrow morning. And then after lunch, which is until 12:30, you guys start at 12:30, right? Then we will welcome the dynamic duo from the Animal Welfare Institute, and that will all take place in this room. If you have any questions, feel free to grab one of us and enjoy your fabulous lunch. Oh, and I want to remind you, it's sponsored by the Bennett Family Foundation, lunch and breakfast, which is really awesome. Diana Bennett is a huge friend of Noah's Animal House and the mission that all of us are supporting in this room. She's a tremendous advocate and a tremendous human being, and they sponsored our breakfast and lunch for both days, so thank you to them. All right.